Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the 435 podcast. I'm your host, Robert McFarland. Over the next several episodes, guys, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the 2025 municipal elections. Mayors and city council members from all over Southern Utah are going to be seeking your vote in helping shape the future of our cities. So this is the place that you're going to be able to get one-on-one conversations with all the candidates to help you make the best decision for you come election season. So please make sure you like and subscribe, share it with other voters throughout Washington County, and make sure they have the information they need to make the decisions that are going to be best for us in the county. We hope you enjoy this episode and this series of episodes, guys. We'll see you out there.
From the Blue Form Media Studios, this is the 435 podcast, the pulse of Southern Utah.
Ivins City Council candidate, how's it going, man?
Yes, sir. Doing good, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
You made it.
I've heard a lot about this.
You've heard a lot about. You've watched a few episodes.
You got clout, man. It's out there.
Something like that. I don't know about clout, but at least I give a platform for everybody to talk about what is important to them, help the voters understand who the candidates are. There's a lot of information on the internet, but when it comes to city politics, there's not a lot of information about candidates. And I think some of it, the candidates, because they're living a life and they have jobs and they have families, and a lot of times they're not experienced politicians, so there's no machine behind them to help, get information out. And so, I felt like this is a good platform to do it and just give you an opportunity. You're the youngest candidate in Southern Utah for any political office.
Really?
Did you know
all
that?
Of Southern Utah? I didn't know.
All
I knew
Southern Utah.
Ivins, and for Ivins, probably ever, historically, I think I'm the youngest candidate for Ivins. Besides for mayor, there's a young man that ran for mayor last mayoral election. But as far as city council goes, I think I'm the youngest. I didn't know. Southern Utah, though. That's
Look at that,
cool.
man. Look at that.
And it's cool that I'm on the show with someone else that's young, to have young people interested in politics and care and want to shape the future is admirable. And so
Thanks,
I
man.
think highly of you.
I appreciate that. There's not a lot of voices for the millennial generation at this stage in Southern Utah. I mean, nationwide, it's a growing number, the older millennials anyway. But the torch is being passed, I think. And so it was cool to see you come out of the primaries with a top 4 vote getter. I think you were second.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the final recording, I think you ended up gaining a few more. Anyway, you got second, which is a good turnout, man. What do you think what attributed to that? What do you think kind of helped you drive as much of the vote as you got?
A couple things. And so I was shocked, transparently. I have roots in Ivins. My grandparents lived here. My parents live here. And obviously I live here with my kids. And so I think that helps quite a bit. My dad was the principal at Snow Canyon High School. He's been an ecclesiastical leader. My mom was on the fire department for 18 years. My grandma's since passed away, but my grandpa's very involved in the Padre Lakes community. And so just having roots here and being able to tap into, my demographic, my parents' demographic, my grandpa's demographic just gives me a lot of reach that comes a little bit more natural and a lot less forced than I think it would for people without those existing connections.
Yeah.
But I've also had a lot of support just through the younger demographic. 35% of Ivins residents are 35 years and younger. But historically, with any election, the younger demographic doesn't get out and vote. And I think that's shifted a little bit. Like I felt a lot of support, a lot of young people, not related, just friends or people that want to help with the cause that came out and helped at Heritage Days or have helped passed out flyers or knocked doors with me. There's been a tangible movement in younger people. And this was pre-Charlie Kirk, but also post-Charlie Kirk. There's been a huge shift in people reaching out. I had a young man, he's probably 22 years old, reached out. He said, and this was like a couple days after Charlie Kirk, he's like, man, how can I get involved? What can I do? I feel something inside me has moved and changed that I want to do more, whether it's on a political level or just get involved with the community or religiously. Is like, I just got to do something. And so there's a lot of things that have gone on during this election cycle in general.
Yeah, it kind of gives me chills a little bit to think about like a tragedy and how it shifts. It shifts people's lives. I mean, I really got into. I was a political science major, so I was interested in politics. I was always interested in like international politics and like federal government and stuff like that. History was my favorite topic in school always. But once I got out of college, got into my career and in my jobs, I just stopped paying attention as much. I moved around a little bit, so I didn't necessarily like get involved in the local. But in 2020, I was like, oh, we got to pay attention to what's going on at the most local level and then all the way up. And so that kind of fired me up. But so it's cool to see that, in a tragedy like Charlie, that there's people that are like saying, hey, we need to be more aware of what's going on in our local community, because it hit close to home here.
Yeah. And even like on a personal level, I'm 31. I'm the same age as Charlie. Obviously I don't have near the reputation that he does or the exposure, but for my wife, like it was kind of like eye-opening to her a little bit, what is putting you in the spotlight do right now? What's our country like? What's happening? Obviously I think Ivins isn't anywhere near a boiling point like that, but it's a wake-up call for a lot of people, and myself, my family included.
Yeah. So you gave me a little bit about your background. Why, I guess, what was like was there a singular moment that made you jump in and want to run for city council?
I've been interested in politics for a while. When I was in college, I interned at the Capitol with Representative Last, and he was the chair of the Appropriations Committee at the time. And so I interned with him and got full access to the Capitol. Like my key card got me in every single door. I got to be involved in a lot of the closed door meetings, a lot of the leadership meetings. So I developed a relationship with him, but also the co-chair at the time was Mike Schultz, who's now the Speaker of the House. And so I've had existing relationships with them, kept those doors and connections open. I later helped Brad with his upcoming campaigns and eventually got involved on the Romney campaign. And so I've had a lot of experience both on the state and national level on kind of like facilitating campaigns, but I've never thrown my hat in the ring before. And I actually felt like I should have done it 2 years ago at the city council level, but my wife and I were pregnant at the time, and it just...
She was pregnant, you were helping.
Yes. Thank you. She did all the hard work, by the way. I don't know how she does it, but I felt like I should have done it, and I didn't. I chickened out, honestly. And so it feels like this has been a long time coming, and here we are today.
How many kids do you have?
Three girls.
3 girls. Nice. I got 3 boys, man.
Trade?
We should
At least
trade,
give me secrets.
Yeah, right? I don't know anything about raising girls, man. And I only had sisters. My wife only had sisters. So we're like brothers. The whole brother relationship is totally new to both of us. So it's kind of a funny dynamic. It's funny how it shapes the family, but that's cool, man. How old's the oldest?
The oldest is 9, and she started coming to events with me. She's helped at Heritage Day. She's came to city council meetings with me.
That's cool.
Hopefully, Mike and the Sharons and other people are like, let's get her trained up for the youth city council.
That'll be cool.
Involved.
That'll be cool. So, you listened to the podcast before, and I like to kind of keep a similar string of questions for all the candidates, so we can kind of, compare the different candidates. In the recent podcast that I've done with the mayors, I got Hurricane coming up, or it'll be posted by the time this comes up. But I re-interviewed the St. George City mayors and the Hurricane City mayors, and we talked more like specific, issues. Right? We talked about water, we talked about housing, traffic, like specific issues. But for this, I really want to have a conversation around how you think and what your perspective is on the role of city council and city government, and how you plan to kind of listen to the constituents and kind of how you decision make. Okay, so that's kind of what the framing of the questions are about. So how do you define leadership in the context of public service, and what personal experiences have helped shape your understanding of that leadership?
Yeah, this is a great question. Both my parents are involved in public service. My dad working for the state as an educator, my mom working for the fire department. And I believe those positions in and of themselves are a offer of service, more or less, and taught me from a young age, it's not always about how much money you're making or chasing the dollar, but I always admired how many friends or how many lives they were able to touch because of positions that they held and being involved in their community. And so I think leadership starts with your own personal goals of what you want to accomplish, but it's also hearing the constituents around you. And so I've had this talk with a couple of people, as I've been mentored through the process. Being the youngest candidate, I've never ran for office. And so I've tried to touch base with all the current city council members and get their advice and ideas and suggestions of how to run a campaign, how to engage constituents, how to listen to constituents, how to take that information and use it. And kind of the dilemma of what I narrowed it down to is, are you elected because people trust you and count on you to be capable of making decisions? Or are you elected because you're going to be able to listen to your supporters and you'll listen to what the most amount of people want you to do, right?
Yeah, their agenda,
Yeah.
right? Are you guided by your ability to decision make, or are you guided by an agenda of a particular group?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to have everyone ask that question, because I think that's what it comes down to. How are you going to vote? You're going to do it because you feel like you have the answers, because you feel like you've been trusted to make those decisions based on accurate information presented to you, or are you going to listen to your supporters? I want to listen to my supporters. I think that's really important. Especially being the candidate that represents a demographic that's not currently represented on council,
Mm-hmm.
The current Ivins City Council, I think, is made up of everyone of retirement age or close. Future Mayor Smith, I think he's 50. He looks like he's in his 30s. But,
Yeah, he does look,
middle 50s and up, and everyone else is past that. And so it's very one-sided. And so I want to be a voice for that younger demographic that's not currently represented. 35% of Ivins residents are 35 years and younger, but we don't have voice or representation on council. And it's hard because a lot of my generation, is exposed to different challenges that the older population can't relate to. Economics are hard. Usually most partners have to work. It's a dual income household, especially if you want to live in Ivins.
Mm-hmm.
Prices are going up. Housing, how do you afford to live in Ivins if you're not already there? If you're looking to move in Ivins, how do you do that? Especially if you're a young family, or if you're an employee, you just want to live in Ivins, whatever it is, attainable housing. And I know these are things that we'll probably get into later. But I hope that kind of answers your initial question.
Yeah,
of who I'm
yeah.
going to listen to and what I look for in a leadership style.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you think that leadership requires absolute consistency, so like unwavering resolve, or is in decision making, or is flexibility and be more pragmatic more important? Are you kind of like hey, is it black and white, or is it you got to be more pragmatic and listening to all sides?
I think my votes and ideas can be pretty black and white when it comes to listening to the people I represent, but then when it comes to taking that information and coming to agreement with the council and trying to find what's best, I realize that my decision might be on one side, or my opinion might be on one side, and other council members might be on the other. And so just working to find middle ground on that side of it, I think there's room to negotiate and to work together. But as far as doing what I believe and what my base, it's weird saying a base because I don't know if that's in city government, it seems just so small, but
there's
to the
still
community
an
voices,
established,
right?
The people that elected you,
I think
that's
it's
your
important
base.
to listen to them, and all ideas should be considered, and all people should be heard, and take that information to the council. Like they elected me, and so I want to make sure that they're heard.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think, or how do you view the relationship between local government and the higher levels of government? What's your understanding of that relationship, maybe from past experiences or what you've learned so far going through the campaign? Yeah, how do you view that relationship between that local government and then the higher levels of government?
In what sense? You mean like how you work together, how you partner? Like what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I think. Do you feel like that local representation and that role extends to the higher levels, or do you feel like the city is the city and there's not really a whole lot of influence you have over the state? A lot of times, what I hear is that's not my job, or that's not out in my scope. I've heard this from multiple current elected officials where it's like, well, that's outside of my influence, where I don't know if that's actually true, just because, your decision-making or legislative abilities are at the city level. I think there's potentially some voice that you have that's larger than just at the city level. And then what do you feel like the roles are of the city and the state government, because I know there's a lot of political pressure from the state to have cities do certain things in order to accomplish goals that the state feels the cities should be doing and are not doing, and so then they pass laws that force cities to do stuff like that. So how do you view that? Do you feel like there's a overextension of power right now, or?
Yeah, so let's get into like a specific example that I think will help answer the question, because Ivins, like in the big scheme of things, we're 12,000 people. You and I both live in Ivins, but we're a bedroom community at the end of the day. Where I feel like the state, like a good example of this right now is Governor Cox mandated, by 2028, there'll be 35,000 attainable homes built throughout the state of Utah. All things being equal, that means Ivins, just population base, would be responsible for roughly 110 attainable homes be built in Ivins.
I think the price point is like under 400,000 or something like that. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a good example. Is that something that the state should be doing? How should the city respond to that? How do you work together? Unfortunately, I think the state's been leading with a carrot. They've been saying this for a while. Attainable housing is important. You got to do it. And cities, not just Ivins, but cities throughout the state haven't been listening to it. And so now we're getting the stick approach where it's like, if you don't do this, say goodbye to your grants, say goodbye to support, resources, that sort of stuff.
Fines, all kinds of things.
Yeah. Which, how does that impact me? How does it impact Ivins? I think that working together, at the local level, we're more in tune. I think that local government is the most impactful to our daily lives. It's something you're going to feel the most, whether it's from what you're paying in taxes to what you're experiencing in the community, your parks, the fill, businesses, whatever. I think it has the most impact on each resident individually. Oftentimes state leaders have more insight, a bigger picture. For example, right now we're going through well, I shouldn't say we're going through it. We've passed a property tax increase. But I know the state is in a special session right now, and they're considering to pass something that will address being able to, and again, I'm being rough right now because I haven't read the full bill myself, but this is coming from a legislator that will allow us to appropriate 0.5 percentage point to emergency services. Instead of having to fund it through the general fund, you can vote to increase like a 0.5 percentage point tax that can go specific to public safety.
So like that would be like a property tax, or would it be like a sales
tax?
Oh, okay. Yeah. And this is one of the interesting dilemmas that we face for cities in Utah, is that our tax code and the way that cities can get revenue is you either get property taxes or it's sales tax and like tourism tax. Those are really the only two revenue sources that these cities can. So they have to decide, do you want it to be more expensive to own a home there, or do you want to really encourage and push commercial development and retail?
Right.
And in a city like Ivins, it's like, well, it's still by landmass it's small, by population it's small. And so, the bill ends up being footed on the property tax level. There's no other option, right? And so they've restricted our ability. The state has restricted the ability for cities to gain revenue from any other source.
Right.
And so that's an interesting bill. It'll be curious to see how that goes through.
They're voting on it on the 6th, is what I was told, 6th of October. And so we'll know shortly. But again, it's the property tax itself has already passed, and I don't want to get too far into it because I support what our leaders decide and what how it shook out. And so I don't know it's necessary to kind of rehash that.
There's a referendum out there to have it go to a popular vote within the city, right?
There is. I think they got to collect 750 signatures to get on the ballot.
I did sign it just for everybody just to be fully aware. Because I think it'd be curious to see how it shakes out. And, it's a referendum, so it just goes to the vote of the people. And then just getting it on the ballot, I think, is an interesting perspective for the city to look at. Obviously, referendums can get overturned and they could just pass another one next session if they wanted to. But at the same time, I think that's a good avenue just to get the idea of what the city really wants.
Yeah.
Do you think they're gonna get 750 signatures, or?
So transparently, I'm collecting signatures for it. I have a packet. I've been collecting them. I've also signed it. I think so. They have to collect 750, and it has to be proportionate throughout the city of where the signatures come from. But I think there's enough people that are fired up about it that they'll definitely get the signatures.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So anyway, we can move past that. So property taxes. I think going back to the relationship between the cities and the state. It's important, I think, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then do you feel like there's been too much overreach, or do you think there's this is kind of a leading question mainly because of like what I think. Do you think it's because cities get overwhelmed with the things that they're required to do that they can't necessarily take the higher viewpoint from the state and proactively approach some of these issues? Do you think that's part of the problem?
Yeah, I think that you're on the local level, and even on the state level, we all have day jobs too. We all have families. We all have day jobs. We have other things that take up our time. So we're not able to invest, full work days every single day to this job, which honestly probably deserves it,
Yeah.
But I also don't think it's fair to hold or set those expectations that someone does have to invest 8-9 hours a day to being a city councilor or mayor position either. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that this position is very demanding, and it takes someone that not only wants to be involved, but has the time to be involved and the dedication to be involved, because it does ask a lot of you.
Yeah, it does. It does for sure.
And so sometimes it's hard to get those, narrow tunnel vision, and you just focus on what people are making the most noise about: water, attainable housing, property taxes, all these things that maintaining, are preserving our natural surroundings, all these things that are really important and vital that we love in Ivins. Mm-hmm. And they voice their concerns about that, and we want to give them answers. We want to address those issues and hear them out. And sometimes it's doesn't leave time for the state level issues.
Yeah, it does. It does for sure. What role does community input play in your decision making process? And I know you kind of addressed this already, but how do you weigh it against your own judgment? So going back to that, you have those two versions. It's like appealing to your base or appealing to your own judgment. What role does community input play to you? If you can dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this is actually something unique that I bring to the table, being on the younger side and having more experience with technology and be able to, access a wider audience quickly, is that we have the ability to honestly get input on any topic we want to within hours if we need to, whether it's through social media or text or however you want to go about. Just with technology, you can get instantaneously feedback. And so I think it's really important to not only implement those strategies, but also to listen to the feedback that you get. I know that the city did a survey, can't remember how many years ago, 2-3 years ago, where they sent out the survey to all the residents, which I think is awesome. We need community input. We need to hear what the people want. And I think it's awesome that they use that feedback to kind of lay out the base for the general plan. And Ivins, I wish there would be more feedback, especially from the younger demographic. I think obviously we're at fault. We all got them, but not everyone responded to it. But I think
it's interesting that was the last time they did it.
Yeah, I think we need to do it more often.
Yeah.
And I think people need to be open-minded that things change, that technology changes, that ideas change, that even when it comes down to infrastructure can change, and just be open to pivot when new information comes, new techniques and strategies are presented. So
yeah. I think it's interesting. We're still stuck in we have to post it on the property. Like when there's development changes or zone changes, it's like you have to, you have to be aware that those are happening. And normally you only see it when it's posted on the lot.
Yeah.
But there's no other real notice kind of system set up, or not an easily accessible one. And I feel like as a resident, you can sign up, say, do you want to know about zone changes in your area? And you say yes. And then all of a sudden you get a survey when new zone changes come up, and click on this link and give us your thoughts on it. Right. And make it a little bit more easy to give feedback and comment. Cause I feel like the more data, the better, right? It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't always mean it's going to change what happens, but the more feedback and more data that you have, the better decisions I think that you can make.
And maybe doing it in a couple different ways, like the survey that we got was a physical survey that we had to send back, but maybe a digital option. I know, back to your comment, I get a text every time it rains from the city that says turn off your sprinklers.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
But also if we could implement that for zoning changes or elections or other things too.
Yeah. It seems like there's some other ways to do it.
Yeah.
So community inputs is going to be a big role in what you want to do moving forward and making decisions.
Yeah. And honestly, I hate to bring up the tax thing again, but that's when I saw, like, when city council is voting on the property tax increase, there was a large turnout of residents that openly spoke against the tax increase. And from an outsider's perspective, it felt like that wasn't heard. Like, it kind of fell on deaf ears. And so there's a lot of frustrated people that have came up to me and expressed, like, I've shared my feelings, I got worked up about this. I got up there, I shared my thoughts, but nobody cared or seemed to give it any thought. Like, it seemed like the decision was already made. And so I think there is frustration already in the community that their voice isn't heard. And so I'm just more motivated and feel like I have more opportunities and existing connections because of my roots, but also because of technology, that I can hear what a lot of people want and make sure to represent them.
Yeah, it seems like being a data-driven, city is more and more important, and we have all of the technology tools to get there.
It's totally possible.
It's completely possible. It's just going to take a concerted effort, and it's probably from our generation that's going to have to drive that, because the older generations, it's just not a natural thing for them to go to, and if they don't know, they don't know. And there's no city manager in Ivins, right? They don't have a planner. They don't have a main city planner that kind of is forecasting out and looking forward. So the city council kind of fills that role, and the mayor fills that role.
Yeah, I mean, there is a city manager.
Not a man. Yeah, I meant planner.
Okay, yeah.
But
correct.
yeah. And so thinking about, as the city continues to grow, which it's going to continue to grow, getting those systems and tools in the earlier, the better, because as it grows, it gets more and more difficult to implement. So I think that'll be an important thing to see.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's totally possible. And what I've seen through this election, through the campaign process, is I've had the opportunity to meet with a ton of residents, but I've also had the opportunity to meet with the other candidates. And Mike Scott specifically has been like a mentor to me through it all. And I know that's going to probably be a surprise to a lot of people, because naturally it seems like people have kind of put us into existing camps where Mike and I weren't necessarily paired up as similar, or to be in that kind of mentor relationship. And there's still things that we don't agree on, but it's been really cool where we have differences of opinions. But he's taken me under his wing and said, like, you could try this strategy, or here's an idea, or maybe you should do this. And so I think that assuming we both get elected, hopefully we can continue that relationship into city council, where Mike's put his heart and soul into this. Like, that guy works hard.
Yeah, he does.
And he is involved and he's dedicated. And I really admire that. And so I know that that carries across the other current city council members, that they put their heart and soul into this. And so I'm confident, that if I come to the table with this idea and have the strategies and show them, I think this would be beneficial to the younger generation, I'm confident that they'll hear and support that.
Yeah, I think so too. I would have the same opinion of Mike. I think he's a dedicated civil servant, and I think he's doing the absolute best job he can. He's not mailing it in, which I can't say that about every city council across the county. I've talked to almost everybody at this stage, and some of them, you get settled in, or there's just only so much capacity that they have. And Mike is at the tippy top with his efforts into it. But it goes back to, is that opinion just one person's opinion, or is it because he's so diligent that a lot of people just kind of default to that one opinion?
Right.
And I think there's room for a broader discussion on how to handle some of these things.
Yeah.
Because I think there's some topics of, it's not what we should do, is how we should go about it, right? And I think that's the thing in Ivins that has the most. There's a lot more options on the hows than that are being presented, at least in my opinion.
And I think that's what led me to run. Is I just think there should be more diversity on the council, so more ideas and thoughts and backgrounds are represented.
Yeah, I think so too. How do you choose between preserving cultural heritage and fostering innovation in the city, and which one do you prioritize, and why, if those two things make sense? Cultural heritage, preserving what it was and what it is, and fostering the innovation. Because we're at like a third life for Ivins. There was like the not desirable area with, mobile homes and not very high property values and no water. And then now we're a resort town, right? With some of the highest values in the state, and for sure the highest values in property values for the county. So we're in this transition of the identity of Ivins. So preserving the cultural heritage and what Ivins is, and then how do you foster innovation? Which one do you prioritize, and where do you think we're at?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, my roots are here, so I naturally lean towards cultural preservation. It's funny that you bring up like the trailer parks and Ivins not being like the most desirable place to live, because that's why my parents moved here, is because it's the only place they could afford. My dad was a school teacher, my mom stayed at home with the kids, and so Ivins was the cheapest place, and so they brought us out here in the late '90s and have been here ever since. And so to see that shift from trailer parks to when I married my wife, my father-in-law said, I never thought I'd let my wife marry someone from Ivins,
Yeah.
because they really did have kind of that stigma
Yeah.
about people that lived in Ivins, and now to see it with Black Desert Resort. My preference and my favorite thing about Ivins is our natural surroundings. I love the Red Mountain. I love the open spaces. I live next to farm property. I love how it smells right after they water, minus allergy season. I don't like it at that point, but I would like to see that preserved, and they just started a committee. It's called the Open Spaces Committee, and my mom's actually a member of it. And the idea is that we identify these key pieces of property in Ivins, these farm properties, and work with the landowner to preserve it, whether it's through a land trust or just convincing them not to sell it off to development. I want to see Ivins remain open and rural, and kind of have those farm properties intermixed into the community. I think we the majority like feeling the small town charm, small community. Doesn't feel chaotic, when you drive out to Little Valley or you go out towards Desert Color and there's just building right on top of each other, and just kind of chaos that entails. I think people like the slower pace of life out in Ivins, and I'd like to preserve that.
Yeah, for sure. So where does the innovation come in to play on that? Do you have any thoughts around how do we have our cake and eat it too?
Yeah, I mean, innovation can be, I guess, are you asking innovation from technology point, innovation from bringing in other businesses? Are you thinking resorts? Like, what do you mean necessarily?
Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, how do you preserve, some kind of agricultural portions of the city, and, going back to affordable housing, or a stable, strong town, right? A strong city that has all of the essential elements that are needed, right? You need you need revenue at some capacity. You need services, local services. You want to have a neighborhood, small town feel. And as it continues to grow, which there's not a ton of land left, but there's quite a bit of land left still, and opportunities to go beyond, along 91 and things like that to kind of build up. Do you think there's a mix of densities that you could have? Do you see a vision where there's a little bit higher density in some areas of town, and then there's the rural and agricultural mixed into it? How do you see that? Because I guess it's kind of innovative. Have farmland and a little bit of desert color style, housing elsewhere. Because I mean, two-story houses. We saw one being built, and I'm like, man, there's a 2-story house being built in Ivins. That's crazy, right?
Right. To go back to the beginning of the question, I think that Ivins is at capacity when it comes to resorts and nightly rentals. I don't want to see any more of that coming through. As far as what it looks like in density, high density housing doesn't necessarily mean to be apartments or townhomes or just like stack them on top of each other. I think you can accomplish it in duplexes or mixed residential settings. An example being the bamboo lot right by Unity Park that's up for zoning right now. That specific project, the city has a chance to work with the developer and, kind of help give impact into what the city needs, and the developer kind of gives some concessions to help us out. Part of it being more parking for the park, but also the realization that we need some, quote unquote, affordable housing. And so the idea right now, or what's proposed, is you do affordable housing, whether it's, like a quad or duplex or even townhomes in the middle of the development, but then surround it by smaller single family homes that mirrors what's around it. I like that idea of kind of mixed housing options that match what's existing. If you want to go strictly high density, and if someone came, like, I want to build high density housing, I'm going to do it. You just tell me where to put it. I'd say, put it out on Highway 91, kind of by the other density, the high density housing. But my personal strategy or idea that I like is the mixed solution.
Yeah, like having it integrated within the community. Yeah, I think that's the mistakes I think oftentimes that cities make is they put urban housing. High density it's a funny term because high density to one city is different than another city in units per acre, and Santa Clara isn't units per acre in St. George. And so looking at all these different things, apartment complexes, a 3-story apartment complex, 4 stories, 5 stories is what a lot of people think in high density, but that doesn't necessarily mean that.
Right.
But having multiple units within an acre, having 4 to 5 units in an acre isn't all that insane, but it comes down to design, right? And allowing for that. So you see more innovation on design and housing types.
Yeah. And then I'd like to bring in some small businesses too. I don't want like a Costco or Walmart, nothing like that big commercial, but some small commercial mixed in there would be helpful and also alleviate some of the pressure on the tax base.
In all the conversations you've had, do you see what are some of the commercial needs within Ivins based on what I think the community has said or mentioned?
So I think stepping back, the big picture of what people want, and this is laid out in the general plan, is people want like a walkable city, right? They want to be able to take the bike path or the walking path and kind of have what they need around them for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's, a dentist office, like an aloe clinic, I'm just throwing that off because that's, we got the one here in Santa Clara, something similar to that.
Yeah.
To more restaurants, maybe something that families can do here locally, a bowling alley. Again, just spitballing ideas. These ideas don't have to stick, but something that kind of meets the mix that we have, because I think it's important that a healthy community has diversity in it, and we're not just one side. We're not just a retirement population. We're not just a young family population. We need to have a mix, and so that applies to businesses as well, tourism, restaurants, activities. Like I think it needs to just have a good mix of options for people.
Yeah, I think so too. What is the role of economic growth in a community's well-being, and how does it compare to other priorities like quality of life and cultural preservation? Do you see the economic growth being a primary source of the health of a city? Is economic growth? Do you view it that way?
To this point, yes, but also realizing, we have roughly 12,000 people in Ivins, and the general plan predicts that we're going to have 20,000 is kind of where we cap at. So that leaves room for roughly 8,000 more people to move here. And then what? Once the growth stops, what literally feeds the city? Where does the revenue come from at that point?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have high hopes for Black Desert and the revenue that they're going to give from, the room tax, from the boardwalk with the different restaurants and businesses that they're going to have in there. I think that we're going to have, I think that's going to make up for the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can build in more small businesses leading up to the 8,000 people coming in, I think we'll be in a good place to offset the balance.
Yeah. It seems like it's not that big of a number. 8,000 doesn't seem like there's that much. And so it's, how do you get really strategic with the land that you got left?
Right.
And so I think it's a priority for a city, I think the size of St. George, just by land mass, right? Where you're talking, 200,000 people in a city versus at a top line 20,000. But, economically, those cities are supporting the bedroom communities like Ivins. So that kind of makes sense.
And I also didn't realize this, but Ivins is bigger than Santa Clara. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. By land mass?
By population.
I'm
not sure about land mass, but by population. But, you drive through Santa Clara and they have a lot of the amenities, and so it feels like it's more of a city, if you will, because you have mixed in commercial use. And so you don't get that feel in Ivins, and you don't get the benefits of that from Ivins, even though they built it right on the border. They're the ones that are benefiting from it.
Yeah. It's interesting that dynamic, having a big grocery store right there. Would another grocery store be helpful in Ivins? Probably not, because there's just not as many people over on that side of town. So they kind of scoop up that land. Do you think it's acceptable for local government to prioritize economic growth over environmental protection? And if so, what conditions would justify that kind of a priority? And environmental protection too, and this is something I want to caveat as well, is it's more than just like preserving the turtles, and more than just water, but it's water, it's power, it's air quality. It's all of the environmental elements that make up Ivins, not just, one or two things, but that's kind of what my thought was.
Yeah, I think that's the foundation of a city. And I think it's important that you have plans in place before you add the growth to it. And so I would like to prioritize kind of preserving what was the term that you used? Sorry,
environmental protection.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. But also including the scope of that, the night sky, Snow Canyon State Park, not getting too close there. Tucson, like I every time I drive up the Tucson, that Sentier thing just like breaks my heart, because I'm like, it's so beautiful, like just preserving some of the views that we have around here, as well as the other environmental factors.
Yeah.
And so I think you find a solution for that. And like when it comes to water, the city council doesn't necessarily have total control over what happens in regards to water. Most of it comes through the Water Conservancy District, but I think we need to do our part to present ideas and also be willing to be a partner when they come asking, because that'll help us have a plan in place to support the growth. At the end of the day, we can't stop the growth. We can guide it, but we can't stop it. And I'm fine with that. I support people's right to property, and they can do what they want with it. But I think we can be a good partner and play a role in the conversation. Yeah,
that makes sense. That's kind of the gist of the main questions. I think you hit most of the stuff. I mean, thinking about what are some of the items that really drive you? What do you think are the biggest, rocks, so to speak, that Ivins needs to tackle over the next couple of years? If you get elected in, where do you feel like the biggest adjustments are going to be made? Is it going to be in infrastructure? Is it going to continue with, how do we zone out what's remaining? Where do you think the biggest decisions are going to be made in the coming years in Ivins?
What's most important to me is the attainable housing, and approaching that from the understanding, that it's a requirement from the state at this point. Because again, I would prioritize preserving our open spaces, but knowing that, we have to come up with attainable housing. I want Ivins to be a place where my kids not only want to live, but can afford to live. I have a brother, he just graduated law school. He's an attorney. He wanted to move to Ivins, couldn't afford it, and so I want families to be able to move here and be able to stay here and put down roots here, because I love Ivins, man. Like, it raised me. I had the best experiences growing up. I love the people. I love our surroundings. I just have a great love for the community. And so I want other young people to experience that and have that opportunity. And so I think attainable housing is an important factor. I know that Sharon Gillespie is on the committee of that right now, and I'd love to work with her and learn from her on her plans. And I think she's doing a good job, and she also puts her heart and soul into her job and does the research and the homework. And so I feel like it's on the right path, but that's something that's super important to me. I'd also want to kind of bring Ivins to the 21st century with, technology. I think we can implement it in our systems. An idea, as like the property tax was being thrown around and different ideas were being suggested, some of the reason for the property tax increase was to fund more people to help with maintenance around the city, whether it's our parks or weeds or different landscapes, taking care of it. I think that, getting some autonomous lawnmowers, for example, Black Desert mows all the fairways at the golf course with robots. And so what if we had a robot at the park that could mow all of Unity Park and free up 3 or 4 hours of that employee's day to go do more human needed jobs, like trim the trees or pull the weeds or something that robots can't do. And just finding different ideas to bring technology and automation into Ivins and kind of bring some of those millennial ideas and strategies to the table.
Cool. That's interesting. What I like that. That's actually a good idea. I hadn't even thought about that. Some people are like, the robots are going to take all our jobs. It's like, who really wanted that job?
But also
we could have them do something else too.
When the residents are paying for the jobs, like, if there's better solutions,
it's true.
Let's not burn the residents to pay for a job that could be done by someone else.
And maybe it'll help us raise the wages for the individuals that a robot can't do that job. Now we can pay the ones that are working a higher wage, which would help everybody as well, right?
Exactly.
I'm curious, the Utah Trust Lands has that property over there off 91 that they've opened for RFP.
Mm-hmm.
Are you, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I think the city of Ivins would have to annex it into the city. So I think the biggest challenge, I think, for the trust lands and like actually making that attainable housing would be it needs a city to run it once it's there. And so if it's not, it would go into county land. What are your thoughts on that? Have you thought about that project at all, or do you have an opinion on that? It's a weird spot to do.
It is a weird spot. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposal is they're going to do, this is the property that's behind the Hidden Springs RV park, right?
It's further west. So it's down. So Indigo Trails, like it kind of is like right behind Indigo Trails, almost across 91 from the entrance into Kayenta.
Okay.
I think that's where the land is, if my memory serves.
Okay.
It's essentially over there, yeah.
Okay. Being transparent, I haven't done a lot of research into it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it discussed at the council meetings, and I haven't really, as you look at my campaign initiatives and stuff, it hasn't been at the top of my items that I've done a lot of homework on yet.
Yeah, and it's a tough one too, because it's all what ifs. Right.
And
so
my heart's still like recovering from the last Sitla property, you know, like
yeah.
we still have PTSD from that.
I know that was a tough one. That was a tough one. Lots of opinions on that one, but they have a mandate and they want to do what they want to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard too, because I have kids in school. Both my parents and my in-laws are all educators, and so I'm torn. Like,
yeah, it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
Last question: what is your opinion on term limits? Do you think city government should have term limits, or state, federal? I think, the president's the only one with really a term limit. So do you have an opinion on term limits?
I do. I think that if you keep winning, or keep being elected by your base, your supporters, by the people in your community, that you should be able to run as long as you want. It's like telling Tom Brady, should you stop winning Super Bowls because you're the best? Like if you're the best at the job and people like you, and you're supportive, then I think you should be able to run as much as you want. I do think that, like specifically on the federal level, it becomes a little unfair just because of the amount of money and resources that gets poured into it. I think people can buy a lot of votes. I know buying is not technically the term, but the money that harvests votes more or less plays a role in people getting elected. So maybe I'll give a caveat saying that at the local level, where it's really grassroots and really effort-based, I have no problem with term limits. At the state and national level, where there's a little bit more that goes into it, I don't like people getting rich out of politics and having career politicians that come out with, a 10x increase in their
net
value.
worth,
yeah. And so it's a catch-22, but I'm a competitive guy. Again, I kind of go back to, if you're willing to put in time and work hard and you represent the people well and they like you, then I think that you should be elected as much as you want.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hear that. It's a tough, it's a tough idea, right? Because on the one hand, 80% of incumbents win because of name recognition more than anything else, because they just know that person. And everybody thinks their congressperson is awesome, but every other congressperson is an idiot. Like the polls always be like, I love my congressperson, but everyone else in Congress sucks. It's like if everybody thinks that, then everybody's probably wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so it's tough to get fresh blood in there, I think, at the federal level.
Yeah.
And I think having a term limit is important there. But at the city level, I think I've adjusted a little bit more on my opinion. Having 3 or 4 terms, like we don't necessarily have to do 1 to 2 terms, but like what's 15 years, like is that enough to let's turn this over? Is there somebody else out there that could do the job?
I mean, it is hard to get the incumbent out, but if you look at like this election, for example, one of the incumbents didn't get past the primary this year, and one of them did, and so I think that's a good example of
there's turnover. There's a lot more turnover in city.
So,
but I see mayors, Mayor Hart, he's
I mean, at that point, you just got to look at someone's sanity. Like, if they want to do it for that long, like that's where the problem is. Like,
that's a good point. Cool, man. Well, I want to wish you the best of luck. Thanks for coming on. I think this help everybody make a good decision. I think you're going to represent, that younger base really well. And Yeah. Is there anything, where can people find more information about you?
Yeah, I have a website. It's www.dylanhurt4ivins.com. Is where you can find more information. Honestly, I like to hear from people over the phone or text or just personal interaction. I'll meet anyone for lunch at Icebox or anything like that. But also, I'm grateful for you having me on.
Thanks, man.
I feel like the world, I shouldn't say the world, the country right now is just at a pivotal point, and I think it's important to have people that care, people that are going to defend our freedoms, people that are going to, I'm a member of Turning Point USA, and Charlie Kirk was a guy that motivated me. I've been listening to him for 5+ years. I sent him a message after I got past the primary, and this was before the assassination. I just said, dude, I really look up to you. You're the person that inspired me to run for office and get involved. And so at the end of the day, there's local topics that people care about. People have their ideas, but I think that, faith, family, and freedom is what matters at the end of the day, and making sure that's preserved and that people know that that's my priority, and that's going to be kind of the guiding factor in the decisions that I'm making is super important.
Sweet, man. Thanks. We're going to leave it at that.
Perfect.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure you go to votestg.com to find more information about all the other candidates, and go to Dylan Hurt for Utah.
Ivins.
For Ivins.
Maybe one day Utah.
Yeah. Dylan Hurt for Ivins.com.
Yes, sir.
.com. The number 4. Okay, we'll see you out there, everybody.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Make sure you're following us on all the social media websites. We love your support. We love the dialogue. We want to continue that going.
Find us at realestate435.com. We'd love to help you find a house here in town or help you get wherever you're going.